You see, we are working from two different if-thens. You're working from the perspective of if you're talented, if you put up a good public image, if you marry a public darling and are rich and powerful, you cannot do certain heinous acts. I am working from the if-then of if you are a part of the brotherhood, then you must do these things. Is he not likely to be a part of the brotherhood, or is he likely to be a part of the brotherhood? Is there evidence that he's a part of the brotherhood, or is there no evidence that he's a part of the brotherhood? It saddens me that in order to get others to understand the truth about the darker side of life and how prevalent and pervasive it truly is, one inadvertently becomes labeled as an outcast by the people you wish to inform the most. Your good intentions are misconstrued by the masses of people who believe every mainstream narrative. Or you're just trying to tear a brother down, or you're a hater. It is assumed that you want the worst for those that the masses believe are the best. Their idols, the modern day gods, the stars, are the best man has to offer in their eyes. So how could they ever? They're the best singing, best rapping, best performing, best dressed, best blessed, rich, famous, and talented examples of man and womankind. How could they ever, you think? The public is bombarded with media appearances, cover stories, backstories, and various kinds of publicity stunts and pop propaganda that helps to paint these flawed idols in a positive and godlike light. Our collective attention spans as humans are nearly warped beyond repair. Yet one constant remains in the proverbial subconscious. Whether in times of war or peace, the lives of our stars have become this age's captivating myths that accompany the Hollywood and entertainment business pantheon of gods and goddesses, so-called. These stars are now our contemporary heroes and villains, the men and women of renown, and many have proclaimed and declared themselves to be deities over us. Admittedly, we see through a glass dimly when it comes to cosmic things. Most of us are unable to see for ourselves certain things that science claims to be true, especially when it comes to the macrocosm of the cosmos. We endure 13 years of instruction called an education, which prepares us to be tamed and willful followers of the religion of scientism. With nothing as proof but the word of scientists, we blindly have been fed a narrative that just so happens to perfectly fit in with the idea of Project Bluebeam. Without having been taught that narrative, we would find an alien invasion to be implausible. I interpret the biblical model of the nature of the earth as one that includes the protection of a covering. The idea of a firmament has led me to come more into agreement with the snow globe model, so-called, which is found in ancient accounts, than the models that NASA's artists have presented to us for decades as accurate. Science handles the academic side of this deception, but for the artistic people, the institution of science fiction entertainment firmly cements in us and in the artistic mind the propaganda needed to facilitate an alien invasion disaster deception, or a meteor hurling from the vastness of outer space to destroy us, right? If something is sent, and the Bible does allude to that when people talk about wormwood, it won't come from outside of the dome. Interestingly enough, both our stars in the field of science and our stars in the field of science fiction have much in common. The most notable names among them belong to fraternities, brotherhoods, societies, and orders, which by default provide checks and balances that keep rogue scientists and so-called fringe science in check. Many people wake up from this spell of self-induced mental and spiritual servitude upon uncovering and discovering that the idea of a secret brotherhood or fraternal order pulling strings within the music and entertainment business is indeed a conspiracy, but not a theory. As the general public awakens to the deception behind Hollywood and the entertainment business, the puppeteers of our mascot idols are phasing out these modern gods to make way for the old ones. Just think of just how much American pop culture influences the other countries of the world. Our pop culture icons are so powerful that they don't merely profess themselves as gods over the masses that follow them, but these so-called stars are actually convincing enough as actors that they cause the masses to give them actual government titles and positions of actual power, or at least political power. First, it was former Cali governor turned president Ronald Reagan. Next, it was Schwarzenegger. Then his pal, former co-star WWF wrestler and commentator Jesse the Body. They prepared us for the Trump card, the big joker, the wild card. But Trump has more in common specifically with Reagan that's relevant to the present conversation, as we've discussed. These folks stand much to lose, including tenure and the respect of their colleagues, if they rock the boat, aka go against the collective hive mind of their brotherhood. This gives scientists, academics, scholars, an incentive to withhold certain information even if they find it to be true, and to promote other information even if they know it cannot be proven. Science fiction writers who become the stars in their field share the same psychological and spiritual shackles. The goal of many of those writers is to achieve fame, fortune, and notoriety in their field. And this is more easily obtained if one goes along and gets along with the powers that be in Hollywood and behind closed doors in the world of entertainment. These writers also find it advantageous to be a part of the in crowd, which translates simply into joining the organization or brotherhood that has the juice in one's particular field of study. Many science fiction writers, as well as scientists, have interests or backgrounds in ancient Eastern traditions, witchcraft, or other forms of occult knowledge, oftentimes Kabbalistic or Hermetic. I believe they are inspired by the spirits that they entertain, which is why so many of their creations ring true to those of us who have spent time in the study of occult and forbidden knowledge. Together, scientists and science fiction writers have given us the proper atmosphere and stage in the theater of our minds, where an alien invasion or a comet coming from the recesses of outer space can possibly create a threat to the lives of people worldwide.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Thank you, Satan. Thank you, Satan. Thank you, Satan. Thank you, Satan.
But it's so much bigger than the music business or one confused rape victim. It's about the ancient religion of the kings of the earth who band together against us, Psalms 2 and 2. The judges of the so-called system of justice and the kings of every industry have a common vested interest in keeping the true secret of their successes a secret.
Whenever I get in trouble, it's the one I call. It's my strategist right here. It's my brother.
I think that they have done their job, both the scientists and the science fiction writers, and so their services will no longer be needed soon. As the old ones present themselves, they will refine what we call science back into the ancient witchcraft that was present during the days of Noah, and science fiction will no longer have a place in a society that is inundated with old ones and their ethereal chariots of hellfire and their new science, which is only the old magic of ancient Babylon. If you're like me and you're watching this, chances are that you have witnessed meritocracy at work in the lives of most of the people you know. People work hard on their vocations and seek a quality education in their particular field of study. Some people master certain crafts after years of training and experience, often with the assistance of experienced teachers who have already mastered said craft. Those who follow these blueprints for success usually receive proper pay and promotion for their performance in due time. This is the slow but steady road to success that is a natural part of life's process. But for some, this path to success is much too slow, unpredictable, and prone to challenges and unexpected twists. They ignore that these are the challenges that build humility and good character. The prince of this world has provided yet another way, another path to success for the kings of this earth. They choose to follow this brotherhood designed blueprint for success and jump ahead in line. It's not just about who gains worldly success, but about who has taken an oath and navigated through fraternal orders in order to get fame, fortune, power, respect, and more than their rightful slice of the pie in this life. Stars are paid extravagant amounts of money to do what takes them little effort. This incentivizes men to seek the arts not as a means of cultural self-expression or a way of preserving and upholding generational societal traditions. It is merely seen by the artist as a means to financial ends today. So this makes it easy for corporate sponsorship, AI duplication, state propaganda, and capitalist greed to control the precious language of art. The stars are idols like their namesakes, the angels, fallen angels that rebelled and made themselves the gods of man's first religions. We have been misled to think these ancient religions were merely myths. They were in fact the records of the fallen angels, deceiving each civilization they encountered through ancestral and familial pride. These fallen were the ancestor gods that established what we know today to be the divine right of kings. And they taught man divination, necromancy, and all forms of magic and witchcraft that we now consider to be part and parcel of civilization, even science so-called. These fallen and their demon spawn, the Nephilim, were the original kings of the East. They have allowed the modern era stars, the new gods of the worldly masses, to be mere placeholders for them and subservient harbingers of the new age, when the fallen so-called old gods would return to take their frightful place. I don't believe in aliens or the idea of the ghosts of departed men haunting the earth. I believe both of these paranormal phenomena are explained by the existence of the rebellious spirits known as fallen angels and their demon spirit spawn, written about in the book of Enoch and the book of Yasha, and throughout the Holy Bible. These spirits imitate the living with whom they were familiar, so they're familiar spirits, often as a way to generationally deceive the living family members. It is an ancient magic. You can find it in ancient Africa. You can find it in ancient Europe. But it's not ancestral, and it's not something you can take back and use for your own advantage. In order to use this magic, you must use it as prescribed. Otherwise, it does not work. To the students of Bobby Hemmett, Dr. York, and all of the rest of you, claiming that it's our magic and we can take it back. Brother's been saying it for 50 years, and no one has done that. And you will not be the first. Those who think that the Don is not merely cosplaying as Christian will have a rude awakening once he takes the role of the presidential P.T. Barnum, who will introduce us to the greatest show on planet Earth. Do you think he will tell you the truth, or that he will also play the game of the final card like Reagan before him? In some card games, by the way, the final card thrown is the trump card. He's part of the game. And when the trump card is thrown, game over. And if you needed another reason to believe it, here's one. Consider the vector, or V.
fact that he is such a wise individual. I think people are fascinated with the idea that a man in the future may know something that we don't know today.
And whose idea was it to have pointed ears?
Well, that started with Gene Roddenberry, who's the creator of the series, the executive producer. He saw the character with pointed ears and various other physical things which we experimented with. And I should say that just before we started shooting the show, we had experimented with 4 or 5 different types of ears. And we were not happy with any of them. And I got a little nervous about it. I thought this is going to be awful funny if these ears don't look right. And I went to Gene and I asked him to give up the idea of the pointed ears. And he said, no, he wouldn't. We're going to keep working on this and we'll get it right eventually. And he said, I promise you that if you do the show with the ears, at the end of 13 episodes, if you're not happy, I'll write you a script where you get an ear job.
Are there any of these things that you do, could they actually take place scientifically?
The scientists tell me that they could. The people in the various NASA installations that I've visited, and they're certainly the people whose opinions I respect, tell me that we work constantly with a thread of scientific possibility in our shows, that we're not doing fantasy, that we're doing potential science fiction. We're doing science fiction, which means potential science possibility, you know.
So I'm with my father and my grandfather and my brother sitting in the bench seats. Women were upstairs. 5 or 6 guys get up on the bema on the stage and they're facing the congregation. They get their talit over their heads and they start this chanting. I think it's called duchening. And my father said to me, don't look. So everybody's got their eyes covered with their hands, or they've got their talit down over their faces, or turned away, turned their back to these guys. And I hear this strange sound coming from them. They're not singers. They were shouters. And dissonant. It was all discordant. And they were doing like, that kind of wailing. And all discordant, not together, not in unison. And then the leader would shout out, Yevorechecho! And the rest of them would respond, Yevorechecho, Yishmerecho! It was chilling. You know? Whoa, something major is happening here. So I peeked, and I saw them with their hands stuck out from beneath their talit like this towards the congregation. I thought, wow. One day we're making the Star Trek series, television series. We come to a very lovely script called Amok Time. It was the first time we're seeing other Vulcans, other people of my race. So I was hoping to find some touches that could develop the story of the Vulcan sociology, history, whatever, ritual. So I said to the director, I think we should have some special greeting that Vulcans do, because he said, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, humans, we have these rituals, things that we do. We shake hands, we nod to each other, we bow to each other, we salute each other. What do Vulcans do? So I suggested this. He said, okay. And that's how we did it as a greeting, a Vulcan greeting. Boy, that just took off through the culture. It was amazing. Within days after it was on the air, I was getting it on the street. People doing this to me, waving to me in this Vulcan gesture. That's interesting. And it's been that way to this day. It's almost 50 years later, people are still doing it. It just touched the magic chord. Most people, to this day, still don't know what it's all about. People don't realize they're blessing each other with this.
Many believe that through the United Nations, the Luciferian agenda can be spread worldwide, and wars, terrorist acts, and other global issues can all be decided and controlled from within this central governing body. Simply put, all of the nations of the world can band together under Lucifer through the use of the United Nations as a peacekeeping, unassuming disguise. And just like the other Kabbalists who use mudras and hand signs to show their allegiance not to biblical Israel, but to
Babylon Israel, the Israel that gave them the Talmud and that gives them Kabbalistic understanding of how to control the spirits, evil spirits, to do their bidding. This is an understanding that they claim they gleaned from Solomon, who it is said used devils and demons, according to the Testament of Solomon, to assist in the building of Solomon's temple. So they believe that they are building Solomon's temple here. They are building another pyramid, another Rome, another Egypt, another empire here with the use of these spirits. And the entire world is using these spirits. The Brotherhood is worldwide, and they're all connected.
This is NASA's official insignia, designed back in 1959, shortly after the space agency's birth. It's casually referred to as the meatball. According to NASA, the sphere represents a planet, the orbit represents space travel, the stars represent space, the vector represents aeronautics. Primary design elements that comprise the NASA meatball, the most dominant of those is the bright red triangular feature that sweeps across the insignia and extends beyond the outside borders of the blue sphere. Whenever NASA references this primary design element, they consistently refer to it by one of two different names. They call it the vector or the chevron. Vector in physics, represented mathematically by an arrow, a vector defines both a magnitude as well as a direction of travel. Chevron, a V or inverted V-shaped pattern or character, also may describe a wedge or triangular-shaped object that points up or down. For the official explanation as to why this vector chevron symbol is featured so prominently in the space agency's insignia, we have to go to NASA's PAO, which provides us with the following excuse. Red chevron is meant to represent aeronautics, as it was the shape of the latest design in hypersonic wings at the time the insignia was created in 1959. NASA Public Affairs Office. The NASA archives contain various documents published during the space agency's early years which relate to the latest design in hypersonic wings from that era. While the chevron vector seen in NASA's official insignia is swept rather than straight-edged, some may still believe it shares a rudimentary shape similarity with several different hypersonic wing designs from that era. However, the truth is that half-century-old designs of high-speed airfoils has nothing to do with the inclusion of this vector-shaped symbol in NASA's official meatball insignia. That official space agency explanation is in fact just a rather facile cover story for the unilluminated. A cover story first told to an ignorant and gullible public decades ago in order to provide, like any good cover story should, a plausible sounding excuse. A vague response designed to keep the true relevance of this vector-shaped symbology hidden from the plebeian masses of planet Earth. These four examples you see here can each be recognized as variations of the V or inverted V vector symbol. This vector shape has long held tremendous secret symbolism for certain elite facets of our planet's population, with those powers that be covertly ensuring that the vector symbology would be globally emblematic of the most advanced and awe-inspiring of all human scientific exploratory endeavors, mankind's reconnaissance of the vast new ocean above that we refer to as space. quote unquote. NASA's meatball insignia is far from the only example of official space program symbology that blatantly engages in this kind of vector worship. NASA's official seal, which was also designed back in the late 1950s at the same time as the meatball insignia. Created for what NASA describes as usage in more formal settings. Note how the layout of the official seal also allows the vector symbol to feature prominently. It should be considered very interesting that NASA is by no means the only space agency on Earth that adopted some variation of this vector symbology as a primary element to include in their official insignia and the seal designs. These are the official insignias for Roscosmos, Russia's new federal space agency established in 1992. The overt inclusion of the vector symbology is rather obvious here. Likewise is the case with the official logo for Starsem, the joint Russian-European organization that since 1996 has run the ultra-dependable Soyuz rocket program. Established in 1996, the Chinese National Space Administration and their primary contractors, the Chinese Aerospace Corp., both also decided to employ the vector as the main component in the design of their official insignias too, coincidentally. The Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency also felt it prudent to ensure the vector symbology featured heavily in their design. The official insignia of the Canadian Space Agency made sure to include the requisite vector worship as well, as did the NSPO, Taiwan's National Space Organization. The ISRO, India's Space Research Organization, built their insignia around the vector symbol too. So did the Belgians, the French, the Swiss. South Korea could not avoid including a variation of the vector either. And neither could the new UK Space Agency. German Aerospace Center, Mexican Space Agency, Scientific and Technical Research Council of Turkey, even the civilian space programs for nations such as Malaysia, Ecuadorian Civilian Space Agency, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and even Bulgaria. All those space agencies from around the globe decided to include some variation of this particular symbology in their official insignias. Why? And paying homage to an old American hypersonic wing design from the late 1950s is absolutely not the reason this global vector veneration exists. Are you starting to see the pattern? Russian Research Institute for Space Instrument Engineering, SpaceX, Astronautics Corporation of America, AsiaSat, Vega, X Prize. Over the decades, the various manned space programs have also been compelled to find ways of incorporating the vector into the design of their official insignia, seals, logos, and patches. For example, this was the official patch for Russia's old Mir space station. Mir means pyramid. This is the official insignia for NASA's famed Apollo lunar landing program. Contrary to NASA's official cover story, that is not actually a letter A prominently featured in the center of the logo. Rather, what you are seeing is yet another example of a vector that in this case is spanned by the salient trio of stars which form Orion's belt. Of course, in some cases, the inclusion of the vector is not nearly as blatant, allowing the symbology to be present without drawing any overt attention. For example, the official insignia of NASA's STS program is comprised of more than one representation of subtle vector symbology. Many of the individual mission-specific patches for the STS program have also incorporated some variation of the vector into their designs. Here are just a few of the many examples. Since 2000, the various long-duration expeditions to the International Space Station have also not been able to avoid the use of the vector symbol in their official mission insignias. Sometimes the symbology is displayed quite overtly and is easy to pick up on. And sometimes it is buried in design subtlety, like in this example above. See how the shape of the book's open pages as well as the rays of the sun both create and disguise the vectors? Nevertheless, whether sweeping or straight edge, blatant or subtle, this V or inverted V symbology in some shape or form is always there. Why? What does it have to do with space? So-called. Since their earliest days, NASA has ensured that the vector served a dominant symbolic role in their manned space project insignias. This is the insignia for NASA's very first manned space program, Project Mercury. According to NASA, the number 7 was incorporated into the design as a tribute to the original 7 Mercury astronauts. Mercury is Gemini. Gemini is the Joker. However, only 6 manned Mercury missions were ever actually flown. Hermes. In reality, there is no number 7 in the Mercury program insignia at all. This is hermetic magic. That was merely a simplistic cover story told to an ignorant public in an attempt to officially explain away the insertion of the vector into the design once again. Each of those 6 individual Mercury mission patches carry this vector symbology as well. It should be obvious by now that NASA and virtually every other space agency on Earth have a clear infatuation with this shape, the V, the vector. And it is also worth noting that it is not only the civilian space sector that blatantly worships some variation of this vector symbology. In the military realm, the U.S. Department of Defense makes use of this symbology over and over again in their many space-related programs. Again, here are just a few examples. Obviously, this pervasive use of the vector symbology and its relationship to human activities in space is not just some big and bizarre coincidence. Coincidence. And neither is this. Yes, the 2 most popular space-based television science fiction franchises of all time, Star Trek and Stargate, also selected the vector for their logos. Coincidentally. Because we know the writers and directors of these shows have nothing to do with the powers that should not be, or the spirits that inspire them. This is not all just some conspiracy theory. The obvious connections are hidden in plain sight. When talking about real-world civilian military space efforts or science fiction TV entertainment propaganda, if the subject matter deals with the exploration of our universe, then the vector shape will be there to play its prominent symbolic role. The powers that be employ this global veneration of the vector symbology as a way of demonstrating who is really running the show on this planet. This prison planet, as the case may be. Again, there is nothing theoretical about this conspiracy either. The proof was just shown to you. This new world order already exists. The level of control they possess goes well beyond old world methods of governance and transcends petty beliefs such as holding a nationalistic allegiance to a sovereign nation state. They are comprised of the global scientific, political, economic, corporate, and military elite, and the power they have really is out of this world. Talking about their snake gods. seen. Thank you, Luna Cognita.
Aside from any official explanations about the vector, you can say that NASA's symbol looks like a forked tongue, though we know it's said to symbolize aeronautics. It actually represents V, or Venus, victory over the world. Remember, the Venus disguise is only another Queen Mother Goddess mask which allows Satan to use the passive-aggressive, beta, or feminine methods of deception, including false love and concern for victims, as is exemplified by the disingenuous display of sensitivity in today's hyper-politically correct environment, urged on by the controlled opposition Me Too movement and the Hollywood staged purging of its so-called casting couch politics. Venus equals the Queen Mother Goddess. Venus equals the bright morning star. Venereal comes from Venus, so does venerate, vain, V-A-I-N, and vain, V-E-I-N. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, sporting a top hat with coat and scarf as he holds up the V'd fingers. He helped to make V for victory famous. Here's an article from Time magazine backing up that claim. V for victory, celebrating a gesture of solidarity and defiance.
Tonight is your chance to see how it all began, to relive the excitement that is V, the most extraordinary miniseries ever. A daring TV journalist struggling to uncover the startling truth behind the aliens' visit to Earth. And a beautiful and brave young scientist fighting for the very survival of the human race. Together, they take you on a fantastic journey to meet the visitors. Prepare yourself for a television event that's out of this world. Prepare for V. Next.
V. It was 1983 when TV audiences first saw this miniseries about an alien invasion of the planet Earth. Now, even though V premiered 3 decades ago, it's still popular among science fiction fans. So why does V still endure after all these years? What is it about the story that continues to capture the imagination of so many viewers? In order to answer these questions, we have to go back and take another look at the miniseries V. Now, the plot of V is relatively straightforward and simple. An alien fleet arrives on Earth and claims to come in peace, but in reality they wish to harvest humanity for food. Now, this plot is very similar to an episode of the classic sci-fi TV series, The Twilight Zone, and the episode is called To Serve Man. In the episode, an alien arrives on Earth to much fanfare and claims that all he wants to do is help humanity. He wants to cure humanity of all its diseases and share his vast alien knowledge with the entire planet. He's even carrying around this book called To Serve Man. It's only later when the alien has gained the trust of humans that it is revealed the book To Serve Man is actually a cookbook. Sounds silly, right? But the first part of V follows the same story structure. The structure is people are giving up their freedom or voluntarily surrendering to some benevolent power who promises to take care of everything. If you go outside the realm of science fiction, the story of a fascist regime taking over America seems inspired by the Sinclair Lewis novel called It Can't Happen Here. Now, in this story, America is taken over by a charismatic politician who slowly turns into a dictator, and ordinary people have to fight back with armed resistance. Now, in the original drafts of V, the draft was called Storm Warnings, and it was a fascist government that took over the country. It was similar to It Can't Happen Here. A fascist government has taken over control of the country. The bosses at NBC did not like this idea and sought to exploit the popularity of Star Wars, so they later replaced the idea of fascist humans with conquering, invading aliens, and the series known as V was born. Now, when V made its premiere in 1983, it was the golden age of the TV miniseries. Miniseries like Roots and The Thornbirds were watched by tens of millions of people. Because at this time, there were only so few networks on TV. There was NBC, ABC, and CBS. So when a miniseries premiered, not only you watched it, but you could be sure that most other people in the country were watching it as well. But V captured a large audience through its very shrewd marketing campaign, which was designed by creator Kenneth Johnson. Now, Johnson had his NBC staff hang up visitor propaganda, actual visitor propaganda, all over New York and LA. So people would walk through the city and see these posters saying, "Friendship is universal." And these were the exact same posters that we would later see in the actual V miniseries. But a few weeks before the series premiered, Johnson had the staff go through the city and spray paint those same posters with the letter V. Now, no one had ever promoted a miniseries this way, so it really heightened audiences' curiosity about the show. It must have worked because when V premiered, over its 2 nights, it captured an estimated 50 million viewers.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity.
In 1938, Orson Welles did a now infamous radio broadcast of the science fiction story War of the Worlds. Now, legend has it that the radio drama was so effective in its imitation of an actual news bulletin that the radio broadcast caused widespread panic all across the country, as people mistakenly thought they were being invaded by Martians. The famous broadcast not only demonstrated Wells's power as a storyteller, but also demonstrated the profound power of the medium of radio. How people got their information was just as important, if not more important, than the information itself. 40 years later, in V, we see the power of a different media. In this case, the medium of television. Television and the power of television plays a significant role in the V series. Let's think about this. The opening scenes from the series, we see a TV broadcast from a battle in El Salvador. It is here where we first meet the show's main character, a TV cameraman named Mike Donovan. Now, when the visitors finally arrive, V's ensemble cast all watch the event via television. In fact, the first 30 minutes of the series are all shots of people entranced by what they're watching on their TV sets. This is effective because it allows the show's creators to introduce and organize all these different characters we're going to be meeting. But we also see the importance of TV as a medium for spreading information and forming public opinions. When Mike Donovan sneaks aboard the mothership and discovers that the visitors are actually man-eating lizards, the aliens respond by seizing control of the media itself. So when the visitors seize power, this is the power that they're seizing. The power of the media. The aliens don't just invade our planet, they invade how we communicate as well. For me, V was never about action or violence. It was a show about power. Who has power and who doesn't. Now, in the story, as the visitors take control, the power relations between the characters begin to shift. In one of my favorite scenes, we see 2 parents who have become terrified of their son because he's been recruited by the visitors. The story of a ragtag group of human rebels fighting off an alien invasion proved so popular that V was made into a weekly series in 1984, but it was canceled after only 1 season. V remained popular for several years and even was rebooted in 2010 as a series on ABC, but I feel the original miniseries will stand the test of time.
So the two pillars went down on 9/11, making way for the symbol of the new order, the transgender child, the Gemini, hermaphrodite, the Baphomet, the space age, this being that has neither identity with gender or nationality as we know it. Its time has come. You notice all the 666s in geoscience. You notice NASA's heliocentric sun worship and the sun worship of the brotherhoods. It all gives place to New Age deception involving spirit guides from other planets who have already made themselves known as so-called ascended masters. And while we are distracted by the dog and pony show of politics and told to pay attention to China, we didn't know that we have a true global conspiracy on our hands, and even China's a part. China's Jade Rabbit recon probe lands on the dark side of the moon. Yeah, right. In preparation for this scene, disclosure pawns remind us that U.S. astronauts said they'd heard music and singing of the dark side as they orbited. So all of the parts and the levels of the Brotherhood are being brought together for this grand last scene. The last scene in a play, the last scene in a movie. It's epic. Take either Avengers movie. There's a lot of chaos. Everything is set into chaos so that things can be brought to order by the end of the movie. But this ain't no movie, brothers and sisters. But we're seeing things unravel now because of the generation at hand, Generation Y, who are bold enough to question things that most of us took for granted. And what's dope about the so-called flat earth craze, if you will, excuse my phrase, is that it proves that there are things about God that man cannot know, thus keeping man in his place and God in his. And there are things about God's creation that man will never discover with his science. It is a wicked and adulterous generation indeed. We seek signs from science in order to know things that God have already described for us, things that God has already described for us in detail that require our faith in his word. Let God be true and every man be a liar. If you are on the fence about God or the nature of the shape of the earth, you will not be when they drop the mothership down on you. And you better know that it's going to happen soon and very soon. And the closer we get to folks unraveling the big science lie, the faster they have to drop down the mothership in the Project Bluebeam type of deception that's been described as being the end time game or the last card played in this end game. So laugh now. Think of all the people who go ogle at Google every day. Googlers, especially students, are stumbling upon so-called flat earth info as they look up science info for class. Childhood's End tells us the children need to believe in the scientific space model in order to be a key part of the end times blue beam level deception. There's so much going on. There's so much to question. So many hidden meanings in the news that we hear every day. Wars, rumors of wars, and non-existent threats to cloak real ones. We have had both the First and Second World Wars. Is it possible that the third will not be conventional war, but the end of all warfare? Z is the end of our alphabet. Is there more hidden symbolism relating to the end times and the last act of this hermetic theater in the 2013 movie World War Z?
Bye.